welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and my co-host.
I am Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, charter member of the Cahiers du Cinéma.
That is just untrue. You're putting yourself on the level of Jean-Luc Godard and
Andre
Francois
Bazin.
Truffaut, yeah, and Jason Harris. Yeah,
I think that's fair.
who was not alive at the time that actually.
But if I was,
you would not have been involved.
that is true.
Yes. So in the second season, but a highbrow film reference is appropriate for this episode of our second season of Awesome Movie Year, where we're talking about the films of 2007. And in this episode, we are looking at the Palme d'Or winner from the 2007 Cannes Film Festival, the Romanian film 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, which probably was written about in Cahiers du Cinéma.
I think so. It is. Hey, man, everyone wrote about this movie. This
That
was
is true.
Lauded throughout the world.
It was indeed. It, of course, won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and cleaned up at a lot of critics groups and things like that. Although controversially, it was submitted as the Romanian selection for the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar, but was not nominated, which got a lot of outcry.
Yeah, that'll go in the legacy section.
It
led
will.
to some rule changes.
It will indeed. But even so, it was interesting to see that it was, because it wasn't released. It played at Cannes in 2007 and was released in a lot of European markets that year, but didn't actually get released in the US until early 2008. But because a lot of critics saw it, it was on a number of critics' top 10 lists in 2007 and then also in 2008. So its acclaim spanned years, really.
2007, 2008. Those are years.
Thank you. It looked like you had something to contribute, and then you clearly did not. And also, interestingly enough, we look at these kind of arty, difficult films, and it's surprising to see this movie made $1.2 million at the box office in North America, which is a lot for a movie like this, and it made $9.8 million worldwide. Which was more money than our previous episode's subject, I Know Who Killed Me.
This is a better movie, guys.
This is a slightly better movie than I Know Who Killed Me. And it was all on a budget of 600,000 euros, which, as we know, is some number of dollars.
Yeah, I don't listen, I'm not into conversion rates right now, kids.
We're not good at math. We've established this on multiple episodes.
No, math is not our thing.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the buddy comedy known as 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days.
Yes. So speaking of numbers, though, it did get a 96% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very good. Obviously, most critics loved this movie, or maybe loved is not the right word, but lauded it strongly. Roger Ebert said, "The movie deliberately levels an unblinking gaze at its subjects. There are no fancy shots, no effects, no quick cuts, and director Cristian Mungiu and his cinematographer Oleg Mutu adhere to a rule of one shot per scene. That makes camera placement and movement crucial and suggests that every shot has been carefully prepared. Even shots where the ostensible subject of the action is half visible or not seen at all serve a purpose by insisting on the context and the frame. Visuals are everything here. The film has no music, only words or silences." And I think that was something we noticed. I remember as we were watching early in this film, you saying to me, was that a single take at one point? And there are many, many long takes in this movie.
It was right at the beginning where you're following one of the two main characters as she walks through the dorm. And it was like, you're with her, so you're not noticing kind of the camera work. And you're like, wait a second. That was like probably a 3 to 4 minute take right there.
Right. Yeah. And this movie is full of those. And I think on the one hand, this is a very naturalistic kind of documentary-like movie. But on the other hand, as Ebert says, it's obviously been carefully planned visually. And to do those kinds of takes a lot of preparation.
You got to do that. And, we'll get to the the dinner scene.
Yes.
Did you read about the preparation of that?
I did. I mean, I know that is another long take scene where the main character, we should mention Otilia, the main character, played by Anamaria Marinca. We're going to mispronounce everybody's name in this episode.
And Gabita?
Yes, is her friend who she is helping to obtain an illegal abortion.
Right. So there's this dinner scene that they it took them 5 days to film it because it's one long take.
Yeah.
17 different takes to get there.
Yeah.
And it lasts for what, 5-6 minutes?
I think it's maybe 8 minutes or something like that. It's there are a lot of really long takes. And yeah, that dinner scene is well regarded because I mean, I think what's impressive, and we'll talk about this more later, but the way he gets across, like Ebert says, the words, but also the silences, how much comes across from what the characters don't say. Locally in Las Vegas Weekly, Mike D'Angelo said, while Mungiu doesn't shy away from the real world implications of Gabita and Attilia's actions, even going so far as to include a controversial close-up of the aborted fetus lying bloody and forlorn on the bathroom floor, which I know was a moment Jason had a lot of difficulty with.
It's 14 seconds long.
Yeah. His intentions are political in a much broader and less potentially divisive sense. Indeed, it's only perhaps half an hour into the film that it even becomes clear what traumatic event these young women are working to arrange. If you go into it with no foreknowledge, as I did, the air is thick with apprehensive mystery, and viewers whose thoughts aren't leaping ahead to the back alley procedure will likely find it that much easier to take stock of what Mungiu is really doing. And that was another thing, I think, at some point in the beginning, obviously we both knew what this movie was about, and I've seen it before, and even when I saw it before, I knew what it was about. But the characters are talking about money at one point, and you were asking me, do we know yet what that's for? And if we didn't, if we hadn't gone into this movie already.
And I kind of like that. And, you know, I had been reading some quotes from Mungiu where he's saying he just wanted to get into it without telling the audience what he's getting into and let the crowd, you know, kind of the viewer catch up with the activities of the film.
Yeah, I like that. It's a very matter of fact portrayal of this. And that includes when it gets to the intense, uncomfortable things, but also just the mundane preparations that the movie starts with.
Right. And through those preparations, you really get to learn a lot about the characters. And one of the strengths of this film is that it's all distilled. Every point of view is distilled around this event, right?
Yeah.
So you're learning about each character based on their involvement and feelings on this event.
Right. Yeah. It is all, there's no extraneous context given in this movie. The last review I have is from Manola Dargis in the New York Times. She says, in 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, a ferocious, unsentimental, often brilliantly directed film about a young woman who helps a friend secure an abortion. The camera doesn't follow the action. It expresses consciousness itself. Later, she says, it's a pitiless, violent story that in its telling becomes a haunting and haunted intellectual and aesthetic achievement.
Yeah, I think back to one scene where Otilia is meeting Mr. Bebe.
Yeah, the abortionist.
Yeah, and Mr. Bebe is he leaves the car to go talk to his mom, who's sitting outside of their home or whatnot. And we just hear what's going on between the mom and Mr. Bebe in the background. But all of our visual is on Otilia, who's also hearing this. And it's a really powerful scene to show kind of the economic strife that Mr. Bebe's family was dealing with in this, I guess, kind of last days of communism in Romania.
Yeah, it takes place in 1987 in Romania.
Yeah,
in the
Ceausescu.
the waning days of his reign, I think, which ended in 89 or 90.
Right. And then also, you know, she's hearing all this stuff. And this is the guy who's going to perform this life altering at the very least and life-threatening procedure to her best friend.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments like that in this movie, and we talked about in the dinner scene too, where Otilia says very little in that scene, and yet the way she expresses her anguish is what you're focused on more than all the inane chatter that's going on around her.
Right, and that dinner scene, which is a break from the intensity, right?
Yeah.
Becomes so important, and usually in those movies, not in those movies,
in the average Romanian abortion movie.
Yeah, right. Usually in movies, when you break away from that can be just a throwaway stuff. But this heightened everything so much, it was so impressive.
Yeah, yeah. So you had never seen this movie before, right?
I had never seen it. I knew of it, but no, never seen it before.
Yeah, and I saw it I was looking it up in March 2008 was actually when it played here in theaters in Las Vegas, and I watched it on a screener. And it's definitely a movie that I was impressed with at the time that I watched it. And I'd been hearing about it obviously for nearly a year since it had been in Cannes and had high expectations. But I remember being definitely impressed with it, and certainly also at the time probably thought I would never watch it again, and yet I did eventually watch it again for this podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your contribution on that front. Any other background details that you would like to mention on this film?
This was his second film, right? Mungiu's second film?
Yeah, it was his second film. His first film is it Ovation, I think? No, Occident. Occident is the name of his first film.
I thought some interesting background, like you said, wasn't nominated for an Oscar, did win the European Film Award, get 15 GoPo nods, which is the Romanian kind of awards.
Their top film awards.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I thought was cool was that there were only 50 movie theaters in Romania when this movie came out. So they did a caravan tour where they like set up movie screens in different cities and towns, and 17,584 people got to see this movie on a caravan tour, which is pretty cool that they did that.
Yeah, and it's impressive that a movie like this can become a sort of an event film, even in a country like as small as Romania.
Right. Well, I mean, look, we never had to live in any type of communist dictatorship, although I guess you could remake this movie in like today's Alabama, where abortion's illegal now, right?
A heartening thought here.
Hey man, that's literally what's going on today. They're banning abortions in states, right?
That is true.
And they're what I had read was between Mungiu and some different scholars, they're saying that because of the abortion ban, through the illegal procedures, anywhere from 10,000 to 500,000 women died in these procedures.
Yeah, in Romania over the course of 25 years or so. Yeah.
So like,
yeah, that's very bad.
Not a good policy, guys.
No, not a good policy. But as I think Mike D'Angelo noted a little bit, this movie is not just about whether abortion should or shouldn't be legal.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about that coming up.
Let's do that. We'll come right back and talk about our general thoughts on 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In our second season on the films of 2007, we are looking at the Palme d'Or winner from the Cannes Film Festival that year, which is Cristian Mungiu's 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, one of the key films in the Romanian New Wave. And I think a very good film, and yet a movie that we would not want to watch again.
I almost would want to watch it again from a filmmaking standpoint because of the stuff that we've talked about. Those long takes are so impressive. I feel like that dinner scene is like something that should be shown at film schools like all over the world. It's so good. I don't want to watch it again, but I would watch it again if need be.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I have actually now watched it twice, and I would watch it again if need be, of course. But I did feel like going into our recent viewing of this movie a little bit of dread. Like, I know this is going to be tough to get through, and I think it is tough to get through. Obviously, that is the point of the movie, is that it's difficult, and you want to feel some of the difficulty that the characters are feeling as they go through this ordeal. And I think the movie, obviously, as you were saying, we didn't live through a period like this, but the movie really gives you a sense of what it was like to live through this period.
Yeah, and I think that, again, the camera work plays into that, where it's just you're almost a fly on the wall seeing these events as they unfold, and you're just sticking with whatever the action is, right? It's not quick cuts to heighten anything. The emotions heighten because it's all happening as you're watching it.
Yeah, those long takes are really impressive, and they're not showy. I think it's easy.
Right. He's not moving the camera like it's, like our buddy Joe Wright from Atonement or whatnot. Right, it's all these amazing different positions, which is great. That's what he does so well. But this is just like putting a camera down and like letting the scene play out.
Right. I think it's the idea of he's not letting us look away. It's maybe we're starting to feel uncomfortable and you'd like for him to cut. You'd like to not be in this moment anymore. And he is forcing you to stay in that moment.
And it takes a lot of balls to do that because, to have the confidence in your cast and crew that, hey, I can leave this camera where it is for the next 4 minutes and people will be interested in whatever is going on. That takes a lot of courage, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And the performances in this movie are very good. I mean, they justify him leaving the camera there on those people for that length of time. And I was reading something about the background that it was very important to him to cast actors who could memorize a lot of lines because there's so much that they'll have to say in that single take. And these were actors, some of them who'd done a lot of stage work, so they're able to memorize entire plays to deliver at one moment.
Right. I think Otilia, whoever played Otilia.
Yeah, Anamaria Marinca, I think is how you pronounce her name. Yeah. And also Vlad Ivanov, who plays the abortionist, I think had some experience.
Yeah, it
with
seems
that
like
too.
since this movie, he's like kind of skyrocketed as an actor in Eastern Europe. What do you know about the Romanian New Wave? That's not a, we both consider ourselves at the very least film fans, in some regard film scholars. You're a critic. I have a film degree on making movies. I don't really know about anything about the Romanian New Wave.
I know a bit about it. I mean, I was actually looking up before we were doing this, the Romanian New Wave kind of lists of movies from that movement to see, well, how many of these have I seen? And I have not seen any of Cristian Mungiu's other films. He had one previous, as we talked about before this. He went on to make a couple more. Beyond the Hills from 2012, I remember being at film festivals, I think, where it was playing, and I didn't end up seeing it. And Graduation, I think, was
he won another Palme d'Or, didn't he?
I don't know if it won, but it was in the running. I think both of those movies played at Cannes in competition. It might have won another Palme d'Or, but I haven't seen any of his other films. I have seen The Death of Mr. Lazarescu, which came out around the same time as this film. These two, that one and 4 Months, were kind of the movies
Right.
that really catapulted the Romanian New Wave into awareness around the world beyond just Romania. And that movie is very similar to this in that it's about bureaucracy getting in the way of basic human needs. And that's a character who is an older man who has, I don't know if it's a heart attack or he's got some medical emergency, and the ridiculous bureaucracy and just what he has to do to get an ambulance to take him to a hospital and a hospital to admit him and all that.
Right. And there's like this, I mean, I didn't find this film humorous, but I know that there is like a tinge of dark humor that Romanians found humorous in this. And
yeah,
just the kind of like everyday bullshit that they always have to put up with
right
in this time period.
Yeah, I mean, there's the scene where Otilia goes to the first hotel that they're trying to book a room at, where Gabita has called previously and supposedly made a reservation. And she shows up to get the room and she's talking to the clerk, who obviously does not care at all about her. And just the ridiculous circular bureaucracy of, it's almost like a Monty Python sketch. Like, well, I have a reservation, so I should get a room. Well, but if you don't have a reservation, you can't get a room. Well, how do I get a room? You make a reservation. Well, I made a reservation, but you don't have a reservation. And
Right.
It's this sort of circular demonstration of the bureaucracy. And then there's some humor to that. I mean, it's definitely dark humor. And obviously Otilia is in distress over this because she has to get this room so that they can have this procedure done.
Well, so they've gone over this plan like many times going into it. Gabita is going to get the abortion, and Otilia, her roommate and dear friend, is going to kind of help her with all the details. But Gabita was the one who put the plan together based on talking to other people who have had illegal abortions, right? But Gabita doesn't really do the things that she needs to do to get the procedure done and to get it done for the price that they agreed on. And that leads to some difficult consequences for the two, I'd say.
Yeah, Gabita is an interesting character because, first of all, it's interesting that this movie, the main character is not the woman who's getting the abortion, but the friend who is helping
Right.
her.
And that was something that I had read that kind of developed over revisions in the script and everything.
Yeah, and I like that. I think there was also mentioned there was a scene And early in the film,
Right, where she
Otilia
visits her.
mentions her dad, Gabita's dad is coming to visit, and that was a scene that was shot that they cut out.
Right.
Because it wasn't about Otilia. But yeah, I mean, even so, Gabita is a very frustrating character. You feel sympathy for her because she's having to go through all this horrific stuff to get an abortion, which is something she should be able to get. But as a person, she's very passive. She's kind of whiny. She doesn't, as Otilia points out, follow through on the basic things that she needs to do. And it does lead to some pretty bad consequences.
Yeah, she makes some really bad choices that affect her and affect Otilia. And you know, basically they both have to, because they don't have the money to pay, because she lied about what month she was in her pregnancy.
She is 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days into her pregnancy.
I know, which they don't say in the film.
No,
but she says she's about 2 months, right?
Yeah.
So this guy, Mr. Bebe, gives him the price for 2 months. At 4 months now, it's a crime, and he's risking, or it's a bigger crime.
It's a bigger crime. Yeah,
he's risking 10 years in prison. So they don't have the money to pay him. So he says the only way he'll do it is if they both have sex with him.
Yes.
And like, it's very transactional, and like, she never really apologizes to Otilia for putting her in that position. And she does try to say like, hey, don't, she has nothing to do with it. She's not even my sister.
Right.
It's all very matter of fact. And even when they show the, abortion, you don't thankfully see anything too close up, but you see, from an angle, this kind of probe going in and this procedure being administered. And it's very matter of fact. It's not really passing judgment one way or the other.
Right. That's true. And I think Gabita at one point, she does thank Otilia, but it's in this very timid way. And you get the sense that maybe she doesn't have the right amount of appreciation.
Yeah, she does thank her, but then when Otilia questions her, like, well, how do we get to this place? And she's like, hey, you agreed to go along with it type stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
What else could I do?
Right. And I thought that was an interesting approach, because your tendency is to sympathize with someone in that position. And the movie almost goes out of its way to make Gabita unsympathetic in a lot of ways.
Right. I think, and then you have this relationship with Otilia and her boyfriend,
who's a kind of a dick.
You think he is? I don't think he doesn't really get any information from her. He doesn't know what's going on. Like, it's like, he's just grasping at this point. And I don't think he's put in a position where he could be a dick.
Well, initially, maybe not. But even initially, when she doesn't tell him what's going on and she just says, I have to do something important, he doesn't care. All he cares about is, will she buy flowers for his mom's party?
Right.
And he doesn't trust her enough that when she says something very important is happening and I need to go do that he will believe her.
Okay, but if I was going to defend him, every time that he asks what's so important, she says, it's nothing that I got to tell you now. So, it's like, in a way, she plays it off as not that important as well.
But I think you have to think about the weight of every time she tells somebody what is happening, that's another risk for her of going to prison and of her friend having to go to prison and potentially have to give birth to a baby in prison or something like that. And to me, I got the sense that I don't know exactly how long she's supposed to have been with this boyfriend, but that maybe she didn't entirely trust him.
It's the end of the road for these two.
Yeah. And even then later on, when she does open up and tell him what's going on, he's kind of insensitive about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is probably he's a college guy. It's his mom's birthday. He's not mature enough to know what to do in these situations.
Right. And of course the propaganda or the government has indoctrinated everyone to believe that this isn't something that you do, that this is wrong. And it's hard for him to accept that this is something that can be done.
He says he would try to help no matter what. He says he wants them to not fight and he would always be there for her. I just don't think this character has the emotional capacity yet in his life to know the right way to handle this situation.
Right. No, that's fair. And I think that actually is in a way maybe parallel with Gabita in that both of them are kind of emotionally immature people. And Otilia is the only character in this movie who has that maturity. And so she has to take on the burden of everyone else's immaturity and get things done.
So what do you think about the aspect of her just agreeing that, okay, well, not really agreeing. Obviously, she's pressured into it, but she goes forward with sleeping with the abortion doctor first.
Yeah, I mean, I think she maybe has a sense of being self-sacrificing and that she has accepted that whether it's fair or not, she is going to be the one who bears the burden of getting this done. And he tells them that, well, if they're not going to do this and they're going to wait and they're going to come up with the money next week, then he won't do it until next week. And obviously, they've already waited too long and they've paid for this hotel room and it's kind of a now or never situation. And so I think that she's the kind of person who is self-sacrificing, does what others ask of her, even if it's maybe not in her own best interest.
Yeah, it's a tough road to hoe for these two. So does
Yeah, yeah. It's nobody in this movie is in an easy position to make a decision.
right. And so they get the procedure, and then she leaves to go to the birthday party to meet the boyfriend's mom,
Right, because she can't say no to him either.
Ottilia, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, man, this just has disaster written all over it, which it doesn't, as we come to learn. I figured like she's gonna leave and Kavita's gonna have these horrible complications and that she's gonna come back and be dead. But this does lead us to this dinner scene where it's the boyfriend's parents. There's about six of them. They're all doctors, right? They're all of a higher class than
Right.
Ottilia.
Yeah.
And Ottilia's just had to sleep with this doctor. Her friend just had to sleep with this doctor. She just had to watch her friend get the abortion, and they went through all these obstacles to get to that point. And now there's all this small talk at the table. When I was young, this happened. And you're
Right.
really just focused on her as all this is going on around her. And it's so effective. And everyone is so jovial and having such a good time. And she's like so removed from everything that's going on there. It's that was the scene I think really that stood out to me in the movie.
Yeah, I think that's for a lot of people who were writing about it at the time, that's the one scene that stands out. And it really does because you get that. And I think it works because we've had everything that leads up to it and we really understand the weight, the burden that Ottilia is dealing with as she's in that scene and is trying to just get through these moments with the boyfriend's family. Um, yeah, and I think also it's interesting what you say about the expectation when she leaves Gabita alone and you think, oh, something terrible is going to happen. And it doesn't. She comes back and we get these moments where she's trying to call the hotel room and Gabita doesn't answer and she's rushing back. She thinks the worst has happened and she gets back. And in fact, the I don't know if we want to call it the best, but exactly what's supposed to happen has happened. The fetus has passed. Gabita is fine. She's resting. But I think the point there is that even when this goes exactly the way it's supposed to go, it's horrible.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the dinner scene because you had mentioned that this movie isn't just about abortion. And in that dinner scene, you learn so much about the society, right? Because all these doctors are asking Ottilia about her family, and she says, "My dad was a soldier." And they call her like simple folk.
Right.
Oh, you simple folk from the country, right? And it's
Yeah.
like they're so judgmental. I mean, a soldier is serving his country, and it's like, you simple folk from the country. And then what are you studying? Oh, I'm studying
Tech, I think.
tech, right?
Says,
Well, yeah, you won't have a really great life. Yeah, I mean, you'll get to live in the city, but you have to work in a factory the whole time,
Yeah,
so.
they're very, very condescending to her. And also about gender roles. They talk about, she asks for a cigarette and they say, oh, in my day, a woman would never smoke in front of her boyfriend's parents
Right.
and things like that.
Yeah, and this was 1987, so that all probably, everything felt real, I'd
Yeah,
say.
yeah, it definitely did. And even though this is a movie, of course, made by a Romanian filmmaker, primarily for a Romanian audience, I think it does give you a window. If you're not familiar with any of that, it gives you a window into that society and gives you an understanding of what it was like.
Yeah. And how fortunate we are to, other than places like Alabama, live in a first world society where you can get the proper medical attention based on certain needs that you might
Right,
have.
right. So I mean, that brings up the question of, is this a pro abortion or pro legalization of abortion film?
I mean, look, as someone who believes abortion should be legal, I think that my eyes would slant towards that, right? There are the people who are anti-abortion who say, well, they show the fetus, which is very tough to watch.
Yeah.
and it's on screen for 14 seconds. And
Right.
and the director, he said, I didn't leave it on screen for any amount of time other than the amount of time it took for the scene to play out emotionally, right?
Right.
Which is what it was. So you can make either argument. I know he said that he was leaving out his personal views. It's not relevant in today's Romania. And that wasn't what the film, he wasn't supposed to dictate one point of view or the other. This was the movie. This was the situation. This is what happened.
Right. Yeah. And I think interestingly, you said it's not an issue in today's Romania, and that maybe the idea of abortion, whether it should or shouldn't be legal, is a much more contentious issue in the US
Crazy.
than it is in Romania at this point. But yeah, I think this is a movie that argues maybe not for abortion, because it certainly shows you how unpleasant that is, and it shows you the result, and it shows you that dead fetus, but it argues for the legalization of abortion because
Right.
the alternative is so horrifying.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Hey, one thing we didn't talk about that was also incredibly effective is the fact that there's no music in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no score. So really you're feeling everything with such an immediate impact on these characters. Every time Otilia has to go somewhere, all you're hearing are this noises of the streets and everything around her. And barking dogs. There's a lot of barking
So many
dogs,
barking dogs
right?
in this movie. Yeah.
It's very tense the whole way through. And then you get to the end credits, and there's I don't know the song, but there was a very upbeat song playing at the end credits, which was strange.
Yeah. Yeah, the dogs are saying there's a line at one point where Mr. Bebe tells them, "Don't bury the fetus somewhere where dogs can dig it up."
Right.
And that really brings home what it means that you've been hearing all these barking dogs throughout the movie, because dogs are everywhere.
Well, she almost did, right? She was on the run and trying to get rid of this fetus, and there was a point where it looked like she found a spot and she heard the dogs, and then she just scampered into this apartment building,
Right, and she
right?
ultimately does what he says, which is go to a high floor in a high rise and put it down the
Right.
garbage chute.
And this is after Gabita said, "Promise me you'll bury it properly."
Right. And I think that's another thing of how she takes on those burdens for someone else, that she knows that Gabita needs to hear, "Yes, I promise I'll bury it properly," and to tell her, "Oh yeah, I did. I buried it," because that's all that Gabita can handle.
Did she tell her that at the end? I thought Gabita asked, and then she just said, "We're never going to talk about this ever again."
That's true. She doesn't specifically say it, but she does promise beforehand that she will do it.
Right.
And I think by not saying anything, she kind of implies that she followed through and did what she said she was going to do.
Yeah, I also felt we had mentioned these long shots that were very static. So when you do get to Otilia kind of in this frantic act trying to get rid of the fetus, you're now moving into this very shaky handheld camera that adds to the emotion of what she's going through and the urgency of everything.
Right. And as I think one of those reviews pointed out, a lot, like especially in that sequence, there's shots where you can barely see anything.
Doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter. And that was another thing. I saw a quote from Cristian Mungiu, who said that at this time, part of the whole the difficulty under communism is there were no streetlights. That there just wasn't electricity for that. And so he wanted to capture that as well.
And that's how his director of photography tried to light it with kind of unique techniques of places and areas that, maybe there's a light coming out of an apartment or something along those lines that's helping light the street. But yeah, they really did a great job as a team, the whole production.
Yeah, it's an impressive. I mean, I think people think of the subject matter first and the difficulty of that, but from a technical standpoint, this is a very accomplished film.
I was worried about watching it because I thought it was going to be difficult to watch. And it wasn't. Look, there were parts that were difficult, the abortion, the fetus, but like the characters were so interesting. I thought that, and the way they had to act within this time frame and the rules and regulations surrounding it, I was very much into this movie. Like, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I know you were kind of dreading it a bit. And when we came up with what we were watching for this season, it was like, uh-oh. And
well, it's a tough subject matter.
Right. No, and I'm not blaming you, but I think I was a little concerned that maybe we would come into this discussion and you would have not gotten on board with this film.
Yeah. I liked it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did. And I did too. Again, I mean, and I also was dreading it. Like I said, having seen it once and thinking, oh, that was a tough sit. And I'm glad I did it, because at the time it was, one of the most acclaimed movies of the year and I should see it. I was worried to come back to it. And I too, like you said, there are parts that are difficult to watch. It's not fun, but I was engaged with it really, I think, the whole time. So out of 5 aborted fetuses, what would you rate this movie?
4.
4 out of 5?
4 feti.
4 feti? Okay. Yeah, I would give it maybe 3.5 out of 5 just because
I'll go with that too.
it is a little difficult to get into, especially at first, but it's a good movie. I mean, I think if anybody thought was sort of afraid to get into this and to watch it, you should give it a shot.
Upon second review, I have taken away a half a fetus, and I will agree.
Which half are you taking away?
Whichever half. Oh man, there's just no way out of this.
No, that was a bad call on my part. We'll stop there and come back and talk some more about the legacy of 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in our second season on the films of 2007. This episode, we are talking about the Palme d'Or winner from the Cannes Film Festival, Cristian Mungiu's 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. And in terms of legacy, we kind of mentioned, I think, the 2 key points about this movie's legacy. And we can start with the Oscar rules being changed, which is a big thing.
Yeah.
The foreign language film, this movie, there was a big outcry that this wasn't nominated, and they changed the makeup of the committee that nominates foreign language films.
It's crazy to me that this didn't get nominated. Yeah. Did you see any of those other movies that were nominated?
I didn't look at what that list was of what was nominated.
The Counterfeiters from Austria.
I might have seen that.
That's what won.
Yeah.
12 from Russia.
That I did not see.
Beaufort from Israel.
No.
Katyn from Poland.
I'm not familiar with that.
And Mongol from Kazakhstan.
I think I may have seen that German film, but I'm not 100% sure.
That was the only one. I have not seen it, but that was the only one I knew.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly this was by far the most notable foreign film of that year.
Right. And it's interesting because this is the one even now today, if you were like casually talking to people who knew about movies, this would be the one that they would know, I think.
Yeah, they would definitely not know those other films. And I think, I mean, it's subjective, of course, but at least it seemed like this rule change maybe led to some more challenging kinds of films being nominated in the foreign language category. And I think nowadays it's almost too far the other way, that you look at the foreign language films that are nominated and then they're all about horrible historical atrocities.
You can have fun in other countries.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, it's interesting to me because last season, in our 1994 season, we talked about the documentary Crumb, which had a similar effect. There was an outcry that it wasn't nominated for the documentary Oscar, and it led to some rule changes.
We only go after the most influential and important films of our days.
Yes. So the other thing that we touched on a little bit is that this movie really kicked off the international recognition for the Romanian New Wave,
right,
and other films of that.
And who are some of the other filmmakers people should look for, Josh?
I can pronounce everybody's name poorly. I think in terms of what I've seen, there's Corneliu Porumbiu, I think I'm mispronouncing, and Christy Pugh, I think, are the 2 other filmmakers whose films I've seen. I've seen The Death of Mr. Lazarescu, as well as a movie called The Treasure, which was from a few years later. And I've also seen another movie. I think Radu Jude is the director of a movie called Everyone in Our Family. Those are the ones that I have seen in this movement. Like I was saying before, The Death of Mr. Lazarescu, along with 4 months, was the one that really brought a lot of international attention to this movement. And there's some other notable films in this movement that I haven't seen: 1208 East of Bucharest, Police Adjective, and
some short films from Pugh and Midalescu as well. So,
yeah, there are quite a few directors. Like I said, I would recommend The Death of Mr. Lazarescu. That has more of the black comedy tone, just the absurdity of the bureaucracy that this guy is dealing with. The Treasure, I thought, was more of the stereotypical sort of downbeat foreign film where it was just kind of boring, and then nothing happened, and then that built to nothing happening. So I wasn't a huge fan of that film, but it did get a lot of good reviews.
Right. So this is started in 2004 and is still going. This kind of Romanian New Wave.
Yeah, all of those filmmakers I think are still working pretty steadily. I think the last movie that Cristian Mungiu made was Graduation in 2016, I want to say.
Speaking of which, you had asked earlier about whether or not he had won a second Palme d'Or. He did not, but he won Best Director for Graduation and also Best Screenplay for Beyond the Hills, both at Cannes.
At Cannes. Yeah, I know he's one of those directors, and Cannes does this a lot where you get in and then every movie you make just gets in.
One thing I was interested when researching him was this time period that this took place is often referred to as like the golden age.
I think sarcastically.
Right. But I mean, but hey, man, I'm sure there are people who look back with the nostalgia of like, hey, how easy life was, right?
Right.
Or, you know, because like it's nostalgia, which is people who miss East Germany and when it was under
communist rule.
Yeah, exactly. So he was gonna do a whole series of 6 films called Tales from the Golden Age, which he was gonna start them, and there was gonna be like younger directors taking on from over there,
right?
Which would have been interesting. But I think he do a movie called Tales.
He ended up doing like an omnibus film called Tales from the Golden Age, where he did that sort of in microcosm. So I think he might have directed one or more segments, and then there were other directors who directed other segments from it, and that came after 4 months. I haven't seen that film either. But yeah, I mean, these movies are, and I haven't seen Beyond the Hills and I haven't seen Graduation, but I know, like I said, being at a film festival where Beyond the Hills was showing and having seen 4 months, 3 weeks, and knowing that movie, that Beyond the Hills, for example, was highly acclaimed, looking at it and thinking, okay, do I want to sit through, and that's longer. I think it's about 2.5 hours long. Do I want to sit through 2.5 hours of this difficult, bleak, I think bleak is the right word for his films, if eventually rewarding story, or do I want to go see something else?
And this was an hour and 53, and I feel like that was good, man. You know,
yeah, it was the right length. I think more would have been tougher to deal with. It gets you don't want to get to a point where the audience just tunes out because it's too much.
Right.
Yeah. I think this was effective. And as far as my limited knowledge of the Romanian New Wave, I think this is the one that I was most impressed with.
Well, you embarrassed yourself with that knowledge.
I'm sorry. I've only seen 4 Romanian New Wave films. I'll get right on that.
Ladies, he's single.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. That's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Follow us on social media.
Awesome Movie Year, Facebook, Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod, Twitter, awesomemovieyear.com, J Harris Comedy, or Jason Harris Comedy, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, goforjason.com.
Find me at joshbellhateseverything.com, on Facebook at Josh Bell Hates Everything, and on Twitter at Signal Bleed. And you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You could find it at piecingpod.com. Find us on Twitter at piecingpod, and check out our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
And check out our next episode when we are talking about what, Jason Harris?
Next episode is documentary, Josh, and it is apropos that it comes after this because we are dealing with a different type of abortion.
Abortion of justice?
An abortion of justice that I think has been righted. We'll have to do a little research, but we are doing the ultra entertaining The King of Kong, about the 2 players who are competing for the world record in the Donkey Kong high score.
I think that will be very entertaining. So tune in for The King of Kong on our next episode. Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.